Welcome back to Area DMG. I'm your host, Phil Wesley, the Mile High Mouth. And for today's episode of Suki Nihon, we're looking at episode 11 of Steven Universe Season 3, Beach City Drift. The universe is my road. You know, I have to admit that I think it's kind of great that Greg is the type of guy who becomes a millionaire, multi-millionaire, and buys a used car. Which, seriously, that's kind of what you do. You just go buy a sensible car that works for your needs, buy a sensible house that works for your needs. You live within those means. The means. Anyways, let's get to the basic gist of this story. Out of nowhere, in an unsuspecting car wash, Connie and Steve are helping Greg with his new car. And then Kevin shows up. You know, Kevin, remember him from, Together Alone? Do you actually care? No, I didn't think so. None of us do. None of us care about whoever Kevin is. We don't actually do. But Steven and Connie do. You see, he made the mistake of wanting to dance with Stevonnie and not understanding that Stevonnie didn't want to dance. Although if you go back and watch that episode again, it's kind of like, nah, fine. No, seriously? If you don't want to dance, stay on the wall. Get somebody else to to make that person go away. You also don't... Anyways, that one just seemed kind of weird. I know they were kind of going with a consent metaphor, but it just came off as clumsy and weird. I will review that episode at some point, and I'll probably tear into parts of it. Although that one has really good music in it. Anyways, Kevin didn't understand that they didn't want to dance. They didn't want to dance. They didn't want to rave. And that's really more or less because their prejudice toward him was that he seems a little conceited and self-serving. He's one of those people who puts on what you call a confident air or whatnot. You know, he's like, oh man, I'm just too busy winning. And there are some people who are really offended and threatened by someone who's like, hey, I'm too busy winning to care about such and such thing. Because I think with Steven and Connie, or rather Stevonnie, everyone has to have them as the center of attention, which seems weird to me. But let's get past that. Anyways, I think the lesson of that one was kind of like, I feel uncomfortable around someone, so it's their fault I'm not comfortable, which I think is kind of a bad lesson. Anyways, going back to this, they remember Kevin. He is kind of a bit of a jerk. He's one of those people with a lot of money or whatnot, and just like, he's got no reason to actually care about anybody. You know, he's your average one percenter or straw person, or... Anyways, this is their Initial D tribute episode. If you haven't watched Initial D, you should go check it out. It's a great series. There are two versions of it. There's the version that Tokyo Pop put out where they were trying to jazz it up. And then there's the good version of it, which is the complete version of it. Go watch Initial D. I think Funimation has the rights to it now. I'm not sure if it's really hard to find, but if you can track it down, Initial D is a lot of fun. It's pretty good. It's also known for having really bad car CGI and having, a lot of technical talk because it's about downhill drifting. And when I was like, oh, this is their Initial D tribute episode, the moment I saw the car, I was like, this is their Initial D tribute episode, isn't it? And I was right. Anyways, I have to say that it's not very original, but I kind of can't wait until we get to eventually a Lapis Lazuli Peridot Death Note tribute episode. I mean, seriously, it's like, if I write Claude's enough in this thing, somebody will drop down dead, right? Anyways, there's some really good music in this one. Because seriously, one of the best parts of Initial D is the downhill races where there's music in the background. It's just good. If you've ever seen the Fast and the Furious, when they're just like, and and they're just doing their street racing thing and their music blaring. Those are why those are awesome. I actually saw Fast and the Furious twice in theaters. First time I saw it for free, because what happened was I used to work at a fast food restaurant years and years and years ago when the movie came out, and I remember I was flirting with somebody who worked at the theater, so I got invited to a bunch of their theater things, and I saw like AI for free, I saw Fast and Furious for free, and I saw Fast and Furious and I was like, that was a pretty good movie. I'm driving, I go into work the next day, and everyone's like talking about how they're going to go see the Fast and the Furious. It's like, hey, is that movie with the cars? And they're all like, yeah. I was like, oh yeah, I saw that last night, that's pretty good. And they all got mad at me because when you get a group of coworkers together who want to go see a movie at the same time, they feel like you're cheating on them if you go see the movie before they do for free. So I ended up seeing it twice in theaters. That happens. But back to this. This has some fantastic background music and some really terrible acting. I mean, the whole point is that Kevin, who is apparently based on someone the writers know or are placing in here as a straw character, is essentially some kind of horrible person, and Steven and Connie decide to get revenge on him by racing him in Greg's obvious Datsun reference. So, eventually they decide, well, kids can't drive, so let's fuse and become an adult, and that's something. So they decide to do that. I love how Stevonnie or Steven and Connie is essentially the audience character. She's the wish fulfillment for the audience character. And Steven's a Mary Sue, or Larry Boo, or I don't know what you would call a male Mary Sue. In other words, he's automatically good at everything, because they're suddenly automatically very good at driving in this episode. And I was like, wait, that's irritating. Anyways, they decide to race Kevin because Kevin's all like, yeah, you guys are obsessed with me. You're thinking about me because you got a taste of the Kevin. And you don't know. He talks like that. He's literally a stereotype for the creepy person that they complain about on Tumblr that technically doesn't actually exist. Yeah, I might lose some fans on Tumblr for that, sorry. But you know it. You know you write a lot of those things there because you want the attention. And we're always there to lavish you with attention, even if it's not exactly something that happened, right? We're not going to tell anybody about that. Anyways, anywho, they decide to race him. He kind of irritates them. They get really mad. They're driving actually pretty well, and then eventually they get so wrapped up in that anger that it causes them to defuse. And they decide, wait a second, let's just race for us. They decide instead, after coming in second place, losing to him, they decide to be the good loser and just, congratulate him. You're like, good game, that type of stuff. And they'll finish the race because of them. One thing I want to note about this particular thing, considering how long they were defused and discussing this between that, it looks like Kevin noticed they stopped for them so they could catch up, and then decided to use a little bit of a boost for his car near the end of it to win at the end, because essentially the Datsun and his particular car probably are not evenly matched in cylinders or in engine power. So when you can't win with technique and such on that, you have to kind of increase the power or the amount of oxygenation in your fuel. That's what nitrous oxide actually does. It increases the amount of fuel you burn. My car actually has a little thing on the pedal called an overdrive mode, where let's say I need a little bit more horsepower, I push that in and it will burn through gasoline faster. That's what that does. And it allows you to get a bit more horses under the wheel, just a little bit more. Anyways, what kind of bugs me a bit though is that when he turns on the NOS in there near the end of the race, it does that little boom thing that they do in video games, which is not representative of actual pickup. And I'm like, Also, they try and present the use of nitrous oxide as cheating. And I'm like, no, it's not. It just allows you to get a little bit more torque or push on your car. The rest of that has to do with the driver. So, anyways, they lose, they come in second, and then they're like, good game, and now we're walking away. And I was just like, wait a second. So the lesson in this particular episode was that when you find people who make you uncomfortable, they don't need to make you uncomfortable if you don't let them make you uncomfortable, and instead of actually trying to like deflect some of this back with humor. Because here's the thing, I know too many people who are kind of like Kevin in the regard that they are a little sarcastic, meaning that they'll talk and they've got like, here's, you know, that little bit of an edge here, that they're a little socially awkward, so they come off as rude, which is not what they are. In fact, most of these people who come off as rude, a lot of the times they want you to like, if they're throwing something out there like, oh hey, you're like in this competition, like, oh, you're just gonna be seeing the back of my taillights. You're like, you need to come back with something else. Instead of being confrontational, you need to be like, oh, and then shoot it back with humor, which Stephen and Connie don't do, or rather Stevonnie doesn't do. Which is unfortunate, because that's not how you grow as a human being. That's not how you make new friends. Sometimes people have weird or aberrant attitudes, and you need to understand where they're coming from with that if you want to be a good friend to these people. What happens here is that it comes down to, instead of deflecting obvious humor or attempts at trying to, you know, reach out or game somebody, it comes off as like, she's like, rather Stevonnie is like at the end, good game, I'm blocking you on Twitter now, which is logically the wrong response. When someone is rude to you on Twitter or in real life, it's up to you to be the bigger person. And being the bigger person isn't like, okay, you're not affecting me, I'm blocking you and walking away. No, the correct response is to try and figure out, oh, this is what this person's doing. That's kind of dumb. Some people are just kind of bad, but even you can get along with just even bad people. It's something you can do. You don't always have to be inflammatory. You don't always have to block people. In fact, my block list on Facebook and Twitter and all sorts of social media is 0. I block nobody. Literally. So, I've even had to hit approve on comments where I'm like, wow, that's a horrible thing for someone to say. And if everyone else goes and just downvotes that or whatnot, eventually it just goes away on its own. But for the most part, I've always believed that everyone, even the weirdest people, or even people who are very rude, deserve to be heard, or deserve some kind of chance. And if something makes you uncomfortable, the easiest way to overcome something that's uncomfortable is to find humor in it. Not to ignore it, not to walk away and such. And that's what I don't like about this particular episode. Aside from not having anything real to do with the plot, it was just more or less a good Stephen and Connie episode, and we like Connie. We really do. But this kind of turned the whole Stevonnie thing into Stephen and Connie's safe space for not dealing with things in an appropriate manner. And I don't think that's healthy or good. I really liked the background music for this. I liked the visual references to Initial D. Those are great. But I didn't particularly like this episode. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this episode. Hit that thumbs up. Like us if you haven't already. And subscribe if you haven't already. And until the next video comes out, you are now caught up.